Imagine waking up to a morning that will reshape the Middle East forever. This is the story of a covert operation years in the making, a strike that eliminated a nation's highest authority and the chaotic chain reaction that followed. Stay with us as we break down exactly how it happened, the global fallout, and why the world is bracing for what comes next. Subscribe to Rootvolutionary for more deep dives into the events changing our world. It is just before sunrise in Israel. A formation of military aircraft lifts off, each loaded with advanced long-range munitions. Intelligence shared between the CIA and Israeli services indicated a critical meeting was underway inside a secure facility in Tehran. Present at this gathering was Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader. The flight time to the target was just over 2 hours. Moments after the aircraft reached their release point, the compound was struck. This is the timeline of the coordinated American-Israeli action, the moment Iran's leadership was decimated, and the escalating conflict that followed. Given the rapidly evolving nature of these events, further details may have emerged since this recording. The relationship between the U.S., Israel, and Iran has been marked by decades of hostility. Prior to 1979, Iran was a monarchy under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a key U.S. ally. His government was ultimately overthrown during the Iranian Revolution, leading to the establishment of the Islamic Republic under Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. His vision was to create a state governed strictly by Islamic principles. Khomeini immediately reversed the country's foreign policy, abandoning its Western alignment. Both the United States and Israel were designated as primary adversaries. Opposing Israel in particular became a central pillar of Iran's revolutionary ideology and strategic doctrine. Following Khomeini's death in 1989, leadership passed to Ali Khamenei, a cleric who had steadily gained influence within the regime's inner circle. In the years that followed, tensions frequently boiled over into proxy conflicts and economic warfare. International sanctions were repeatedly levied against Iran. The country also emerged as a primary financial backer for militant groups opposing Israel. In 2002, previously unknown uranium enrichment facilities were revealed, fueling long-standing suspicions that Iran was pursuing nuclear capabilities either for energy or for weapons development. Iran has consistently denied any ambition to build atomic bombs. Multiple efforts were undertaken by the U.S. and Israel to hinder the nuclear program, ranging from cyber-sabotage to the targeted killings of scientists, as well as diplomatic engagement, particularly by the United States. The year 2015 saw a landmark agreement between the Obama administration and Tehran. It was hailed as a victory for diplomacy, ensuring, according to its proponents, that Iran would not be able to develop a nuclear weapon. However, in 2018, President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the pact, calling it fundamentally flawed. Relations deteriorated further from that point. By 2025, amidst another round of negotiations, Israel and the U.S. conducted a series of strikes utilizing bunker-busting munitions, severely damaging several key Iranian nuclear sites. During this same period, Iran's economic situation worsened dramatically. The national currency collapsed, the cost of food skyrocketed, and public discontent grew. The end of 2025 saw widespread protests erupt throughout the nation. Demonstrators, both peaceful and violent, demanded the dissolution of the Islamic Republic. President Trump publicly supported an uprising, suggesting that assistance was forthcoming. The government's response was a brutal crackdown. The nationwide internet was shut down, creating a blackout of information for several days. Ultimately, the death toll from the suppression reached the thousands, with tens of thousands more reportedly arrested. The U.S. began reinforcing its military presence in the region, accompanied by stark warnings from President Trump directed at Tehran. A final attempt at diplomacy in Geneva on a Thursday in late February proved unsuccessful. 2 days later, on a Saturday morning in Tehran, at a secure government complex not far from a major square, the stage was set. This complex is known to house key administrative offices, including those of the Presidency and the National Security Council, as well as accommodations for the Supreme Leader. In the preceding months, American intelligence had reportedly made significant breakthroughs in tracking the Supreme Leader's communications and movements under duress. The CIA had dedicated extensive resources to monitoring Khamenei, mapping his routines and locations with high confidence. They had identified a high-level meeting occurring at the complex that day. The original plan called for a nighttime strike, but the opportunity presented by this gathering was deemed too significant to postpone. Suddenly, the buildings were hit by Israeli missiles. At the moment of impact, several high-ranking national security officials were inside one structure, while the Supreme Leader was reportedly in another. Subsequent satellite imagery revealed the extensive damage and smoke rising from the site. Verified footage from the vicinity confirmed thick plumes of smoke emanating from the compound. Among those confirmed killed in the initial strike was Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Also deceased were the Chief of Staff of Iran's Armed Forces, the head of the National Defense Council, the Commander-in-Chief of the IRGC, and the Defense Minister. Israeli media reported that in the opening seconds of the attack, dozens of senior Iranian officials were killed. The operation, known as Roaring Lion in Israel and Epic Fury in the U.S., had been in development for many months. The Iranian president, however, survived the strike. The Secretary of the National Security Council promised retaliation and assured the public that governance would continue. The attack on the leadership compound was only the beginning. A subsequent wave of strikes focused on neutralizing Iran's air defense systems, particularly those protecting Tehran. A third wave involved a massive deployment of Israeli fighter jets, aiming to rapidly degrade Iran's offensive missile capabilities. The U.S. military joined the operation roughly half an hour after the initial strike on the leadership. According to reports, American efforts concentrated on targets in the eastern part of Iran, as well as the Iranian Navy, using Tomahawk missiles fired from warships and ground-based rocket artillery systems. Military and command centers in Tehran were repeatedly hit. Explosions were reported in other major cities across the country. President Trump released a video formally announcing the operation, urging the Iranian populace to assume control of their own government. The Israeli Prime Minister issued a similar statement shortly thereafter. Soon after these announcements, a strike occurred at an elementary school in the Hormozgan province. Iranian officials stated that the attack killed a large number of people, mostly children, though these figures were subject to independent verification. Reports indicated the school was located near an Iranian naval base, and the U.S. military announced it would investigate the incident. In response, Iran initiated Operation True Promise 4, launching retaliatory strikes. Hundreds of missiles were fired at targets across the region, with a significant barrage directed at Israel. In a show of solidarity, the Houthi movement in Yemen announced it would resume attacks on Red Sea shipping, ending a period of relative calm. The U.S.-led coalition reported intercepting multiple projectiles aimed at Erbil, Iraq, with no casualties, though later reports suggested explosions near the airport where U.S. forces are based. The conflict widened. A drone strike hit a terminal at Dubai International Airport, closing the airspace. Fires broke out at several landmark hotels in the UAE, though it was unclear if they were direct hits or caused by falling debris. The UAE was not the only nation targeted. In Bahrain, the headquarters of the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet was attacked. In Qatar, dozens of ballistic missiles were fired, causing some injuries from debris. A Saudi airbase was also targeted, though the missiles were reportedly intercepted. Jordan's military reported intercepting numerous drones and missiles that appeared to be headed for U.S. bases within its borders. In Kuwait, drone strikes hit passenger areas at the international airport. In Syria, Debris from an intercepted Iranian missile resulted in civilian casualties. Both Qatar and Saudi Arabia stated they reserved the right to retaliate, and the Arab League issued a formal condemnation of Iran's actions. In response to the widespread attacks, NATO placed its missile defense systems in Europe and its early warning radar in Turkey on heightened alert. Security experts raised concerns about the potential activation of Iranian sleeper cells in Europe and North America. The rapidly unfolding events make a comprehensive account challenging as retaliatory strikes continued. The extent of U.S. involvement became a point of significant debate. President Trump framed the action as defensive, necessary to protect Americans from an imminent threat posed by the Iranian regime. This represents the argument for a war of necessity. The claim was that an attack was imminent, requiring a preemptive response. However, this justification is contested. U.S. intelligence reportedly assessed that Iran was still years away from developing a nuclear weapon. Furthermore, Iran's ballistic missiles are primarily a regional threat, lacking the range to strike the American homeland. This has led some analysts to propose that the attack was a war of choice, a preventive measure exploiting what was perceived as a moment of Iranian weakness. Such preventive wars are often viewed as illegal under international law, as they set a precedent for perpetual conflict based on perceived future threats. There is also internal debate regarding the constitutionality of the action, as it was initiated without a formal declaration of war from Congress. Protests erupted across the U.S. and globally, with some opposing the Iranian regime and others protesting American military involvement. Global oil markets reacted sharply, with prices spiking. Experts warned of a potential international energy crisis if the Strait of Hormuz were to be closed. Inside Iran, reactions were mixed, with some celebrating the death of the supreme leader while others mourned. The question of succession remained unresolved. A provisional government was formed, vowing revenge and continuing to strike at Israeli and U.S. assets. The full human cost was difficult to ascertain. Initial reports indicated a small number of American military fatalities and injuries. Regional media reported casualties in Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Lebanon, and Iraq. The Iranian Red Crescent reported hundreds of fatalities and injuries since the start of the attacks, though these numbers did not distinguish between combatants and civilians. The situation remained highly volatile, with a high likelihood of further escalation. As we've seen, a single, precisely timed strike can unravel decades of tense stalemate, plunging an entire region into chaos. The repercussions of this event will be felt for generations, reshaping alliances and igniting conflicts we are only beginning to understand. What happens next is uncertain, but we'll be here to break it all down. If you want to stay informed on this story and others like it, make sure to subscribe to Rootvolutionary and hit the notification bell so you never miss an analysis. Thanks for watching.